Hi guys, welcome to the first video for The 100 Dresses by Eleanor Estes, and this is a Newbery Honor book, and it was illustrated by Louis Slobodkin. I think that's how you pronounce the names. So we will get into this. Let's see, I'm still learning the camera. All right, The 100 Dresses. This story goes along with our Unit 1, How We Express Ourselves, in 3rd grade. These are two of the characters. And this girl, she's one of the main characters, so we will meet them all in our first chapters. The 100 Dresses by Eleanor Estes, illustrated by Louis Slobodkin. And this is a Houghton Mifflin Harcourt publishing. Here we see a student around a wall, kind of hiding maybe, and then there's some other kids that look like they're playing on the playground. Can you see that? This story does take place at a school, and well, let's go. We're starting off with a letter to readers. When I am asked about my mother's book, The 100 Dresses, I often wonder what to say. What more meaning could my words give to a book that, although written 60 years ago, continues to reach the hearts of children around the world? What answers could I give the children who still write letters of thanks and praise to my mother? Is this a true story? They ask. Did this happen to you? Well, most stories are based on both fact and fiction, fiction being not true. And certainly this is true for The 100 Dresses. Years ago, I asked my mother why she had written the story. She told me about a classmate in her elementary school who had been taunted because she wore the same dress to school every day, and because her Polish name was unusual and difficult for many to pronounce, like I had difficulty pronouncing the name of the illustrator. My mother was in school during World War I, and Polish names were uncommon then in the small town of West Haven, Connecticut, where my mother grew up, and where the story takes place. Let me try to adjust that. Is that easier? Her classmate wore the same dress to school each day because it was the only one she had. This little girl moved away to New York City in the middle of the school year, and my mother, as sometimes happens in real life, did not have the opportunity to tell her she was sorry. So maybe her mom played the role of one of the characters we will meet, who ultimately was sorry. My mother never forgot the little girl who had been so badly treated. She herself knew what it was like to be poor as a child, to always be cold in winter, to wear clothes passed down to her by her sister. But was this a reason to tease or be teased? Was it right to play with the feelings of one who was different? What could she do so many years later, my mother wondered, to set things right? To reach out to the girl who had stood lonely and silent against the red brick wall of the school. The girl we saw in the picture up on this page. This is the girl that the author, Eleanor Estes, is trying to write this book and apologize to. Try to make things better many years later. Well, she thought, the one thing she could do was to write her story. And so The 100 Dresses was born. Was the character Maddie based on my mother? Probably. Did Wanda really have 100 dresses at home? Certainly. In her imagination, she did. Decades later, The 100 Dresses is still loved by children. Not long ago, I received a letter from a little girl in Southern California, where we live. She wrote she was especially moved by Wanda's ability to forgive. She wrote, "Seeing people for themselves, from the inside, is one lesson I learned from Wanda. she forgave both Peggy and Maddie, even though she had to put up with them every day. I am grateful to all the children who continue to love this extraordinary story. May the 100 Dresses live on for many, many more years. This was written by Eleanor Estes, the daughter of Eleanor. So here we go. This is the table of contents. It tells us all the chapters and the page numbers we can find them. So we've got chapter 1 is Wanda. Then we've got chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5, chapter 6, and chapter 7. So I will break this book up into 7 videos. And Wanda is chapter 1. A lot of times the table of contents will have the number of chapters numbered, like a list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But this time it just says the name of the chapter. So starting on page 2, we will start reading Wanda. The 100 Dresses. This is our title page. It tells us the title again. I'm not sure the purpose of a title page, except if my book were damaged and the cover were removed or torn, then I would know the title. Here we go. Wanda. And you can see where she's walking from. This house, we will assume, is her house. There we go. Wanda. Today, Monday, Wanda Petronsky was not in her seat. But nobody, not even Peggy and Madeline, the girls who started all the fun, noticed her absence. Usually, Wanda sat in the next to the last seat, in the last row, in room 13. She sat in the corner of the room where the rough boys, who did not make good marks or good grades on their report cards, sat. The corner of the room where there was the most scuffling of feet, most roars of laughter when anything funny was said, and most mud and dirt on the floor. Wanda did not sit there because she was rough and noisy. On the contrary, she was very quiet and rarely said anything at all. And nobody had ever heard her laugh out loud. Sometimes she twisted her mouth into a crooked sort of smile, but that was all. Nobody knew exactly why Wanda sat in that seat unless it was because she came all the way from Boggin's Heights, and her feet were usually caked with dry mud that she picked up coming down the country roads. So not all the roads in their community had cement or top paving. Maybe the teacher liked to keep all the children who were apt to come in with dirty shoes in one corner of the room. But no one really thought much about Wanda Petronsky once she was in the classroom. The time they thought about her was outside of school hours, at noontime when they were coming back to school. In this school, the students would go home for lunch. So they would come to school in the morning, do some lessons, go home for lunch, and then come back. Or in the morning, early before school began, when groups of 2 or 3 or even more would be talking and laughing on their way to the schoolyard. Then, sometimes they waited for Wanda to have fun with her. I don't think they mean fun with her. I think they mean fun at her expense. The next day, Tuesday, Wanda was not in school either, and nobody noticed her absence again, except the teacher and probably Big Bill Byron. Ooh, Big Bill Byron. Say that 5 times fast. Alliteration. The same sound over and over. Big Bill Byron, who sat in the seat behind Wanda's and who could now put his long legs around her empty desk, one on each side, and sit there like a frog, to the great entertainment of all in his corner of the room. But on Wednesday, Peggy and Maddie, who sat in the front row along with other children who got good marks and didn't track in a whole lot of mud, did notice that Wanda wasn't there. Peggy was the most popular girl in school. She was pretty, she had many pretty clothes, and her auburn hair was curly, Hair that's auburn is kind of like a reddish brown, orangey brown. Maddie was her closest friend. So Peggy and Maddie are two main characters, and they're the ones that have fun with at the expense of Wanda. And we haven't met Wanda yet, but we've heard about her. The reason Peggy and Maddie noticed Wanda's absence was because Wanda had made them late to school. They had waited and waited for Wanda to have some fun with her, and she just didn't come. She just hadn't come. They kept thinking she'd come any minute. They saw Jack Beggles running to school, his necktie askew, and his cap at a precarious tilt. They knew it must be late, for he always managed to slide into his chair exactly when the bell rang, as though he were making a touchdown. Still they waited 1 minute more, and 1 minute more, hoping she'd come. But finally, they had to race off without seeing her. The two girls reached their classroom after the doors had been closed. The children were reciting in unison the Gettysburg Address. It's a speech. For that was the way Miss Mason always began the session. Peggy and Maddie slipped into their seats just as the class was saying the last lines. There they all are, standing at their desks. And this quote is from the Gettysburg Address. That these dead shall not have died in vain, that the nation shall, under God, have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. And that is the end of Chapter 1. Chapter 1, Wanda. So the next chapter we'll learn about the dresses game. And the title of the book is The 100 Dresses. So dresses are a big part of this book. I hope you enjoyed the introduction and will join for Chapter 2.